Hi everyone. Some of these tomato plants came from seeds that were from 2018. So going into this, I didn't really expect much from them. I figured maybe a few would sprout, but honestly, I wasn't counting on it. So instead of just planting them straight into the soil, I decided to start them using a paper towel method to give them the best chance possible. And surprisingly, a lot of them actually germinated. And from there, I moved into seed trays, let them grow out a little bit, and then I upgraded them into 16-ounce paper cups. And now they're finally ready to go into the ground. And I have to say, I'm really happy with how these turned out. If you look at the root stems on these, they're super healthy and really well developed. And that's going to make a big difference once they go into the garden. And now comes planting the tomatoes. One of the most important things you can do is remove the lower leaves. And that could mean just at the very bottom set or even the next set up, depending on the size of your plant. And the reason for that is because tomatoes are a little unique. If you look closely at the stem, you'll see these tiny little hairs along it, and those hairs actually turn into roots. So when you plant your tomatoes deeper into the soil, along that buried stem, you're basically allowing the plant to grow a much larger root system, and that leads to a stronger plant overall. One that can access more water, more nutrients, and it usually requires less maintenance over time. Now, normally I would plant these pretty deep to take full advantage of that, but in this bed, I have a little bit of limitation. The top layer is garden soil, but underneath that, I have branches and garden clippings, so I can't dig as deep as I normally would without running into that layer. Next year, I'll have a little more flexibility as that layer kind of breaks down and I add a little more topsoil or garden soil to the top. So what I'm going to do is to plant these as deep as I can within that soil layer just to give them some of that benefit. All right, for this plant, I'm planting uh, this one is a raspberry Lyanna, and the ones on the sides are Tommy Toe tomatoes. Tommy Toes are a large cherry tomato, and I think it's one of my favorites to grow. They're really juicy and produce well in my area, and the plant itself is just really beautiful once it gets going. And I forgot, they're red cherry tomatoes, red, juicy, larger cherry tomatoes. And then the raspberry Lyannas, I have three of those in the middle. So this row, I have 5 tomatoes and 2 Tommy Toes on the ends, and then the raspberry Lyannas in the middle. And they're a heart-shaped pink tomato, kind of medium to small size. And I grew these before, but I made a mistake of planting them in the back of my old garden where they didn't get the best sun. And on top of that, I had some critters that kept getting to them. So this year, I'm giving them a better spot right up front where they'll get more sun and hopefully a little more attention from me too. And one thing I'll say is if you're growing multiple varieties, especially ones that look similar, make sure you label them. I can't tell you how many times I've thought, oh, I'll remember this. And then halfway through the season, I have absolutely no idea which plant is which anymore. And if you can't tell from the leaves, it'll be really hard to tell until it starts fruiting, and then hopefully you'll be able to tell from there. So definitely take some time to label them in the beginning. All right, I have these planted for now, and I'm going to secure them so they have some support, and I'll go into detail on this supporting technique in a minute as I plant the second row of tomatoes. I put down a rope to help me plant these in a straight line, and first I'll roughly place them down so I can get them spaced out properly. I have about 5 tomatoes within 7.5 feet. My bed is about 8 feet, and these paper cups that they're planted in temporarily can be a little tricky to remove, but I do like using them. They're inexpensive and a perfect size for tomatoes and peppers, and like you saw when I planted the first row, they produce really nice root systems because of how it holds and releases the water. The roots are nicely developed and perfect for planting outside. I'm planting 5 tomatoes on this side too. First I have a sun gold tomato, which is a pretty orange cherry tomato. that's not too strong tasting or not too acidic. And then I have a pineapple tomato, which is a large yellow reddish tomato that's also not too acidic. It's one of my absolute favorites. And then I have a Hungarian heart, a large heart-shaped tomato. And then lastly on the end, I have super sweet 100, a small cherry tomato. I'm about finished planting. I'm just going to give them a quick water to settle them in. But yes, I do still need to run water out to this garden. So for now, I'm just going to use a watering can, which is fine for the moment. But once these plants get bigger, we will need to get an upgrade in the heat of the summer and once they get bigger and need more water. The next step is supporting these tomatoes. I've tried a lot of different support methods over the years, cages, stakes, different trellis systems, and honestly, a lot of them work well. But this year I wanted to try something or go back to something, as I've tried this before, something that's quick, simple, and budget friendly since I'm starting a lot with this garden since I'm starting from scratch. So I'm going to go with the Florida weave. If you've never used it before, it's a really efficient way to support tomatoes, especially if you're growing them in a row like I am. If you have a really long, wide bed or just a long space that you're going to plant tomatoes, all you need really are two sturdy stakes on each end of your bed and then some sort of rope or twine. I had this thin white rope on hand, so that's what I'm going to use. And then I picked up two 6-foot metal T-posts to anchor everything on each end. I've used different types of materials in the past, so if you have something on hand that may be able to work as long as it's sturdy on the ends and then you have some sort of rope. You don't want to go with something that's going to break down too fast as far as the rope. Like I've used some older twine in the past where it broke down and then I had to re-support everything again. So just kind of give it a tug and see if it'll be strong enough to hold throughout the season. I actually started setting this up on the other side of the bed and forgot to record part of it, so I'll walk you through the full process here. What I like to do first is run a single line across just to give me a visual guide for spacing and keeping everything straight in a row. And once the plants are in, as I'm still planting my plants, once all the plants are in and positioned correctly, I'll start the weaving process, which is very quick. So the idea is that you run the rope along the side of the plants and then cross over to the other post and then continue that pattern back and forth like you're weaving. This creates kind of like a sandwich around the plants, supporting them from both sides. So when it's windy, they'll be supported on one side and then on the other side. And as the tomatoes grow taller, you keep adding new lines higher up. Now, I set mine up a little differently than the traditional method. Instead of just wrapping continuously, I like to tie off the ends so I can easily adjust the tension later. Sometimes you might need to make some adjustments, and I don't want to go back and have to rewrap everything after my tomato leaves and plants have gone around and tied themselves up. It just gets kind of complicated. So it's nice to be able to untie and adjust slightly if you need to. For example, if the rope loosens or I need to reposition something, I can just untie, adjust, and then retighten without having to redo the whole thing. Also, some people will wrap the string around each individual plant, but I personally don't like doing that. I feel like it can put too much pressure on the stem, especially as the plant grows and thickens the stem. So I prefer just to let the weave hold everything in place naturally without having to tie up each plant or twist the string around it. From here, I'll just keep building this up as the plants grow, adding new layers every so often. And you can set up the full height if you prefer of the weave all at once. So you can just do it once you set up, just set it all the way up to the very top and then just neatly tuck in the plants as they grow. But I actually I actually enjoy coming out here and adjusting it over time. It helps me stay more connected to what's going on in the garden and then catch any issues early or make adjustments as needed. And as you can see here, it's actually a pretty windy day, but these plants are already getting a good amount of support just from this first level. All right, that's everything for today. These are all planted and supported, and it's just a matter of letting them grow. I'm especially excited to see how the raspberry Lyannas do this year in a better location. Hopefully, we'll get a good harvest from those. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share. It really helps me keep sharing plant and garden tips with you. Until next time.